22 commercials, 7 levels. This Iceberg features some of the most disturbing banned commercials ever released. We'll start with ads that were pulled for being too uncomfortable and slowly move into those that literally sparked global outrage.
License and registration, please.
I don't have anything in the truck. I know my rights.
So, let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Scrub Session. A bright blast of studio light hit the table as Denise and Monica stepped into frame. The script they were about to present was a simple one focused on selling a wash tool, but it would not stay that way for long. Axe, a men's body spray and shower brand from Unilever, had been pushing edgy humor in the early 2010s, hoping to stand out with ads that mixed confidence with shock. This commercial was an extension of Axe testing how crude they could be on TV. Every part of the segment depended on sports balls lined across the table. The moment the hosts explained that regular soap could not clean dirty equipment, the ad shifted into a territory that would make it one of Axe's most talked about spots.
So no one wants to play with dirty equipment. That's why you have to keep your balls clean. Problem is, bar of soap just doesn't cut it. See? Still dirty.
Well, how can guys clean their balls so that they're more enjoyable to play with?
Well, there's finally a tool that can really get the job done. The Axe Detailer. Cleans your balls.
They placed the Axe Detailer on the table beside the different balls, showing its soft side for lather and its rough side for scrubbing. Their movements were slow and clear, and they kept the tone steady as they lifted small, smooth balls for the first demo. Men from the audience stepped forward next, each one holding 2 balls in their hands while asking the host to clean their balls using the detailer. Denise and Monica stayed in character, brushing the tool across its fuzzy surface with the same steady movements they used in the earlier demo. They cleaned them one by one, focusing on the edges and seams until each ball looked polished. The balls were a clear suggestion toward human testicles. The host, Monica, received the title of True Champion for her technique, and the segment ended with a simple call to find Axe products in stores. But once the commercial aired, the audience argued that the visuals and wording pushed too close to humor for daytime or early evening broadcast. Soon, stations began reviewing whether it could keep airing at all. Axe allowed the ad to run for a short time, but the reactions grew stronger every week, which led to it eventually being permanently banned. The Clean Your Balls commercial is much more famous for the backlash it received than the detailer tool it was trying to sell. Boy at the window. A woman tries to pull a bunker boot off the foot of a man lying on the ground while a young boy watches through a window with wide eyes. It starts as a straight product shot, then immediately becomes much more suggestive. Bunker Footwear is a fashion brand that sells modern shoes and boots, and at the time, they were trying to stand out by using bold humor in their ads. However, this commercial pushed things too far. The camera focuses on the woman's slow polishing while cutting back to the boy's fixed stare. The shots last longer than usual, and because of that, viewers have more time to notice what the moment looks like. The woman keeps wiping the shoe with slow, careful strokes while her face stays serious. A man suddenly appears beside her, looking surprised as she finishes cleaning the shoe. His confused expression shows he had no idea her actions looked strange to anyone watching. The boy appears one more time, still staring, before his mother steps in and pulls him away from the window. When the commercial aired, viewers complained because the scene relied too much on humor, and many felt it became inappropriate the moment a child was added to the frame. Broadcasters agreed, and the mix of adult-themed visuals and a young boy reacting made the ad unsuitable for general audiences. Because of the backlash, Bunker removed the commercial completely and later moved toward safer marketing that focused only on the shoes themselves. I know that there are gonna be people who watch this video and who are like, that's not even that bad and everything. Why are you saying that they're so scandalous? Because they were removed from TV and they were a big deal back then. I know you don't think it's a big deal, Jeremy, but they thought it was, so we're talking about it. Level 2. Candy Fire. By 2008, Snickers was running a long line of "You're not you when you're hungry" commercials, and most of them were light and playful. However, one of them took a different approach when it depended completely on a man's public humiliation. In the commercial, a large truck suddenly drives into the frame as a man known as Mr. T stands in the back pointing straight at the speed walker while shouting at him. He tells the man to run like a real man while the jogger reacts in confusion.
Speed walking? I pity you, fool! You a disgrace to the man race! It's time to run like a real man!
The scene escalates when Mr. T lifts a mounted launcher and fires Snickers bars toward the man as he runs. The candy shoots across the street and the truck speeds forward while the jogger tries to get away. The idea is meant to be comedic, but the visual of someone being chased while candy fires from a machine gun makes the moment feel a little bit more aggressive than expected. Mr. T keeps yelling from the truck, warning the jogger of trouble with a capital Mr. T, and the moment continues at full speed until the ad ends.
And there's gonna be trouble with the capital Mr. T! Snickers, get some nuts!
Once the commercial aired, complaints came in quickly because many viewers felt the joke targeted the jogger in a way that crossed a line. Advocacy groups argued that the ad made fun of the way someone moved, and broadcasters agreed that the tone felt more like ridicule than humor. Snickers pulled the commercial from UK television shortly after the backlash. The company said the ad was meant to be funny, but they accepted that it did not land that way for many people. The rest of the campaign continued, but this spot was removed and became one of the most talked about ads the brand ever pulled. Boy, I'd hate to be the person who thought up that commercial only to have it pulled. I mean, I pity the fool. The Woman They Knew. At a high school reunion, a woman in a leopard print dress walks in alone. People pause mid-sentence to stare at her, but on a closer look, they realize that all isn't as it seems. As the woman moves through the room, a man steps forward and tries to figure out who she is.
Don't tell me. I never forget a face. Don't help me here.
The camera stays on him as he studies her features. Then the narrator lists the cost of her surgeries. A new nose for $6,000, lips for $3,000, and a new chest for $8,000. These details were clues meant to guide the audience. Then suddenly the man reacts in shock as he discovers who the woman truly is.
It's amazing the changes you can make for a few $1,000s.
Bob Johnson? Hi, Tom.
Imagine what Holiday Inns will look like when we spend $1 billion. Holiday Inn, on the way.
Holiday Inn was spending huge amounts of money renovating rooms, updating buildings, and trying to change how people viewed the brand. Their ad team wanted a makeover theme that felt dramatic, and they believed a huge reveal would capture that idea. However, the way the commercial framed this moment placed the attention on shock instead of storytelling, and that choice ultimately shaped how viewers understood it. The scene relied on the shock of recognizing someone after a major transformation, and the entire message centered on that reaction. The message was supposed to feel clever, but the way it was executed placed the weight on surprise alone, and that made the moment feel uncomfortable for many viewers. Advocacy groups argued that the ad treated a transgender woman's identity as something meant for entertainment. They believed that the message supported ideas that made trans people feel mocked or misunderstood. Holiday Inn faced pressure because the conversation about representation was already shifting, and the commercial looked out of step with the direction culture was moving. The company pulled the ad soon after the complaints increased and continued its renovation campaign with safer options. Level 3. Spin to White. A lady leans over her washing machine and drops a detergent pod inside. A black paint-stained man walks into the room with a smile, his clothes and face covered in marks. He leans toward the woman and moves in as if they're about to kiss. Suddenly, the woman shoves a detergent pod in his mouth and forces him headfirst into the washing machine. No one washing knew it yet, but this was about to turn into one of the most controversial detergent ads ever shown on television. And probably not because of kids eating Tide Pods. Kyobi is a Chinese laundry brand, and at the time they wanted an ad that showed a dramatic before and after cleaning effect. But that before and after created a level of backlash the brand could not control. The woman slammed the lid of the washing machine shut, sat on top of it, and stayed completely still as muffled sounds came from inside. When the cycle ended, she lifted the lid and a different man climbed out, a young Chinese man wearing a bright white shirt. He smiled and held up a Kyobi detergent pod as if the product had performed a perfect cleaning transformation. The message landed badly. Viewers around the world pointed out how the ad used a black man as the dirty version and replaced him with a light-skinned man as the clean result. The image is connected directly to a long, painful history of soap ads that once claimed dark skin could be washed away. And even if Kyobi did not mean to echo that history, the message was impossible to ignore.
I think it might be because that we don't have much history of black people fighting against discrimination here in China. And that's why many people here are lack of the awareness of how sensitive this topic is. Everyone is equal and should be respected.
Social media spread the clips within hours. News outlets covered the story, and the ad was called one of the most offensive commercials ever released.
In China itself, has this created shock or not?
It has. I think it makes for a very uncomfortable viewing for a lot of people, and they took it on social media to express their anger. We have been victims of racial discrimination ourselves. That doesn't mean we should impose it to other people.
Kyobi removed the ad and said they did not intend to cause harm, but the impact had already reached a global scale. And it remains one of the most widely criticized ads of that decade. Runner and the Hummer. Just for Feet wanted a commercial that could stand out during the 1999 Super Bowl. They wanted a shocking twist to grab attention, but they had no idea how it would look on screen. They chose a Kenyan runner as their main character, while a white Hummer drove close behind him with a group of men inside watching him. I know some of you already know where this is going. The moment felt strange right away because their excitement did not match the calm run he was trying to finish. The men then moved to the next step of their plan. One of them held a cup of water laced with something to make the runner weak. They tossed it toward him, and the effect was fast. The runner drank it without knowing what was inside, and his steps slowed almost at once. He then fell to the ground as the men ran toward him with no fear or concern. They stood over him while he lay there, unable to move, and they removed his running shoes while he was still conscious. They placed new Just for Feet shoes on him, smiling as if they had done something helpful. Although the ad treated this moment like a punchline, nothing about the scene felt funny. It showed a group of men, a black athlete, taking his shoes and fixing him without his choice. The final shot showed the runner waking in confusion, looking at the shoes on his feet while the men stared proudly from the Hummer. The commercial ended with the store's logo, as if the disturbing scene was nothing more than a bold joke. The moment the ad aired, viewers across the country said the ad felt and cruel because it showed a Kenyan athlete being hunted and many believed the ad was tone deaf, and international news outlets reported on the outrage.
Just for Feet has the shoes you love most in the newest styles and colors. Over 3,000 shoes in stock every single day.
Just for Feet tried to blame the outside ad agency, but the agency said the company had approved every part of the idea. The public fight made things worse, and the brand's reputation dropped even lower. That same year, Just for Feet filed for bankruptcy, and the commercial became a symbol of how badly a campaign can fail when it turns a person into a joke. Today, the Kenyan runner commercial is remembered as one of the biggest failures in Super Bowl history. Goat on the run. A goat screamed for more soda as a woman yelled back at it. No one watching knew it yet, but this ad was already heading toward a place it would never recover from. Mountain Dew worked with Tyler, the creator, because they wanted to create an ad that had exaggerated humor and unpredictable characters. But the idea they approved relied on scenes that touched on real fears and real harm. And once those images appeared on screen, none of it felt funny to viewers watching. The goat was shown pulled over during a police stop, standing beside a car as an officer asked for papers and questioned what was in the trunk.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
License and registration, please.
I don't have anything in the trunk. I know my rights.
The goat acted nervously and restlessly, looking around as if it had something to hide. When the trunk was opened, whatever was inside caused the goat to panic and run while shouting that it would never be caught. The ad never showed what the officer found, which only made the scene feel darker. But then, the commercial then cut to the most disturbing part. A woman on crutches entering a police lineup room, shaken and injured. She was asked to point out her attacker from a row of 5 black men standing beside the goat. As she looked down the line, the goat stared straight at her and threatened her, telling her to stay quiet and warning her what would happen if she spoke. Unable to go on, the woman screamed and ran out of the room.
I can't do this! I can't do this! No! 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 No!
Viewers who watched this saw a scared victim being mocked, while black men were placed in a violent setting they had nothing to do with. People believe the ad made light of violence against women and used racial images that should never be played for laughs. The images were too close to real fear and real harm to be brushed off as just humor. PepsiCo pulled the entire campaign and admitted the ad crossed a line. Tyler, the creator, later said the goat was meant to be a wild, creative addition, not a statement about race or crime, but by that point, the damage had already been done. Fight of a lifetime. The baby burst out of the hospital window and shot into the sky before anyone could react. The moment happened so fast that it barely gave viewers time to understand what was happening. What did I just read? This commercial was made to introduce the Xbox 360, Microsoft's next major gaming console. Instead of showing games or players, the brand chose a message about time.
This is the Xbox, and so for the first time, let me now unveil Xbox.
That's fascinating.
The idea was simple on paper. Life moves fast, so people should make time to play. But the way the ad showed that idea was extreme, and that choice shaped how it was received. As the baby flew through the air, his body began to change. He aged from a newborn into a small child, then into a teenager, all while still moving forward at full speed. The sky blurred behind him as his face grew older, and the pace never slowed. He continued aging in mid-air, turning into a young man and then into someone much older as years passed in seconds. By the time he reached middle age, his hair had turned gray, his face sagged, and the weight of time showed clearly. He had no control over where he was going or how fast he was getting there. Then the flight ended. His body dropped straight down and crashed into an open grave in a cemetery. Most people were shocked because the ad used a baby to carry the entire message. Viewers felt that showing a newborn being thrown into the sky, aged in seconds, and then dropped into a grave was a little strange. A lot of broadcasters refused to air the ad, saying the imagery was too dark for general audiences. Microsoft pulled the commercial from several regions and reduced how often it aired. While some praised it as bold and artistic, others felt it relied too much on shock instead of connection. I don't know, I think it sounds funny. Not a toy. The boy sat on the floor surrounded by toys, completely unaware that what he was holding was not meant for him. The scene looked playful, but it was already moving toward a moment that would shock anyone watching. This commercial was made by IKEA as part of its long-running message about clutter and storage. The brand often used awkward humor to show what happens when everyday items are left lying around. Their goal was to remind people to keep their homes organized. However, this ad took that idea into dangerous territory by building the joke around a child discovering something meant for adults. The boy noticed the silver object on the floor and picked it up with curiosity, treating it like any other toy he found nearby. The camera showed it more clearly, revealing that it was an adult item left out in the open. The boy pressed a button and the device began to vibrate. He laughed, not understanding what it was, only reacting to the movement and noise. The camera stayed on him as he waved it around, using it like a toy rocket while it continued to shake. The ad relied on the contrast between his innocence and the adult meaning of the object, and that contrast was meant to be funny. Instead, it became disturbing because the humor depended on placing a child inside an adult situation without his knowledge. The commercial then cut to a clean IKEA storage cabinet, presented as the solution to the problem. IKEA, what's the special cabinet for storing those? Oh, this is a locker. IKEA immediately pulled the commercial from TV and chose not to air it again. The brand later said the intention was to warn adults about clutter, but admitted the execution maybe went a little too far. After the backlash, IKEA shifted back to safer humor that avoided children entirely. The ads so far have been unsettling, but this next level pushed boundaries in ways that changed broadcasting rules forever. So hit that subscribe button and let's continue. Level 4. Orange Sprint Strike. Tango had built its whole brand around loud, wild fun. The Orange Man ad became their biggest example of that style, but it also became the one that crossed a line they did not see coming. In the commercial, a man lifts his can of Tango and takes a sip while standing in the middle of a busy street. People walk past like everything is normal, but a man painted bright orange sprints towards the drinker with fast, sharp movements that looked too intense for a simple flavor joke. Then he slaps the drinker hard across both cheeks in one sudden motion, the sound echoing as the narrator describes the hit as a super taste sensation.
Oh, yes, we could be in for a quintessential Tango taste sensation here.
The slap was meant to convey how strong the orange flavor was, but the force of it made the moment feel more violent. The ad replayed the slap from several angles, with each one showing the shock on the man's face as he tried to understand what had just hit him. When the replay ended, the man stood frozen, holding his Tango can as if he could not make sense of what had happened. What the brand did not expect was how quickly children across the UK would copy the slap. Kids began hitting each other at school, shouting the slogan and running away laughing. The joke was easy to imitate, and it spread faster than the company could control. Broadcasters immediately pulled it from television and told Tango they had to change the scene. The company released a new version where the orange man made a raspberry sound instead of slapping anyone, removing the physical hit while keeping the absurd tone.
I don't think he was expecting that!
The Orange Man ad showed how a fun idea can slip into real-world trouble when it's too easy for people, especially children, to imitate. Mugabe's empty seats. Robert Mugabe sat at a long dinner table holding a place card for Muammar Gaddafi. The moment he lifted the card, he knew that something darker was coming. Nando's created this commercial during a time when they were known for their political jokes, and the brand often used real leaders and real events that stood out across South Africa. They wanted a campaign that showed how far their comedy could go, but the timing of this ad put them in a risky position, as it aired only weeks after Gaddafi's death. So the joke relied on real memories that were still fresh with grief. The scene cut to Mugabe's flashbacks, and the first memory showed him and Gaddafi throwing water balloons at each other, laughing loudly. Mugabe stood on a small karaoke stage beside Kim Jong-il, singing into a shared microphone while colorful lights blinked around them. Then the memory shifted again, showing Saddam Hussein lying on the sand beside Mugabe as they made sand angels together. The scenes were silly on the surface, but each one placed men tied to painful histories in childlike settings, creating tension. The flashbacks grew even more exaggerated when Mugabe pushed P.W. Botha on a playground swing and then stood atop a military tank with Idi Amin, copying the famous "I'm flying" pose. Each memory showed Mugabe with another leader who was now gone, and the sequence made him look like someone remembering a friend group that no longer existed. The ad then snapped back to the present. Mugabe sat alone again at the long table, and this time his expression was far more empty than before. The narrator said,
"No one should ever have to eat alone, so get a Nando's six-pack meal for $6."
while the food appeared on screen. The tone switched from sadness to bright promotion in 1 second, which made the sudden shift all the more unsettling. Many viewers said the commercial ignored the real suffering linked to the leaders it showed. Zimbabwean political groups released threats, and workers in Nando's branches reported harassment. Because the risk grew too high, the brand pulled the ad and ended the campaign. The last dictator standing is remembered today as one of Nando's most extreme ads, and it shows how a simple joke can become dangerous when it stands too close to real trauma and real power. Reaper at the alley. When the hood of the cloak shifted, viewers saw the Grim Reaper, and that single image terrified people across the country. The Australian government released this commercial in 1987 during a time when the public was panicked, confused, and unprepared for AIDS. Still, officials wanted a message strong enough to shake everyone because the virus was spreading quickly and silence was only making things worse. This ad became their loudest attempt to force people to listen. The first ball hit the human pins in slow motion, knocking them down one by one as the Reaper stood firmly at the end of the lane. The narration explained that AIDS could strike anyone, pushing the idea that the danger was not distant or limited. It was unpredictable and fast.
At first, only gays and IV users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
Parents tried to shield their children as the Reaper walked forward, sending another ball straight into a crowd of people who fell to the floor like fragile objects. AIDS was shown as the force that did not even spare kids. The commercial clearly refused to soften the message. Some adults shared that the ad opened their eyes and finally made the risk feel real. Health lines began receiving more calls and testing numbers increased, indicating that the fear instilled by the commercial was finally pushing people to act. But the backlash was just as strong. Parents said the ad terrified their children. Even schools complained about kids having nightmares. And viewers said the ad crossed a line by causing panic instead of a clear message. The government defended the campaign at first, saying the country needed a wake-up call, but the pressure kept growing. The ad was eventually pulled from TV much earlier than planned. To this day, Grim Reaper is considered the most disturbing public health commercial ever broadcast. Call at night. A phone rings through a dark hallway as a woman hurries toward it, still half asleep. The caller on the other end, however, would deliver news that would make this the worst night of her life.
Bon, vous faites quoi là? On est sur le parking et on commence à se faire chier donc...
Sécurité routière released Unsettling because France was facing a rise in road deaths among young adults. The agency wanted a film that showed the damage families carry long after the crash is over. So they built a story that traced one bad decision from the moment it was made to the moment it reached everyone connected to it. The commercial showed a parking lot where a group of friends stood around their cars, teasing one another and passing the time as if nothing serious could touch them. They planned to leave after a while, but when the owner of one of the cars tried to take the wheel, even though he was clearly drunk, a small argument broke out that should have stopped the entire night from moving forward. No one took control, and because no one stepped in, the car still pulled away, and that choice created the path the film followed next. Hours later, the gendarme arrived at the home of Frédéric Roland Jacques' mother and asked her to confirm his identity. The officers told her that Frédéric had been in an accident and had died at the scene.
Votre fils a eu un accident de la circulation à 3h30 sur la départementale 22.
Et?
Il a perdu la vie, madame. Ça va vous demander beaucoup de courage, madame, mais je vais vous demander de venir nous accompagner pour reconnaître votre fils.
At the crash site, first responders tried to reach a victim who was still breathing and asked how many people had been inside the car. The team called for backup because the collision involved two vehicles and the second car who was injured. As they searched the area, they found another victim with a severe head injury described as a perte de substance crânienne importante. Back in the parking lot, one of the friends tried calling Julien, unaware that the night had already turned deadly and that the phone he hoped would ring would never be answered again. The film closed on the faces of people trying to understand what had happened. The friends stared at their phones in shock, the mother stood in a hospital corridor barely holding herself together, and the responders stepped back from the wreckage after doing all they could.
Qu'est-ce qu'il fout? C'est pas bon ça. J'aime pas ça.
The entire film existed to show what one careless choice can take from everyone it touches, and how a single decision behind the wheel can break lives that never stepped into the car. Unsettling remains one of France's most devastating road safety campaigns because it used real human consequences instead of dramatic crashes, and it forced viewers to see the damage that begins long after the accident ends. Behind her door. Keira Knightley stepped off the film set and headed toward her apartment, but her home would be hiding something unbelievably dark. Nothing in her steps showed fear, which made the truth inside her apartment even harder to watch once she was inside. Women's Aid created this short film to show how can hide in everyday life. They chose an actress people knew well so the message would hit harder. When Keira entered her home, she barely had a second to relax before her partner stepped out from the shadows while questioning her. He pressed her about where she had been, with his demeanor growing more menacing by the second.
Here.
How was he today? Your leading man?
Oh, gentle heart, please.
How did it feel? Did it feel real?
It's my job.
The scenes then moved between her real fear and the world she had just left on set, creating a quiet confusion that mirrored how many victims hide their pain behind calm faces. His anger built fast. He shoved her, grabbed her, and screamed as the camera stayed close on her face, showing how fear sits in the space between breath and shock. The final moments kept the camera on her as she lay on the floor, bruised, shaking, and staring ahead with the blank focus of someone trying to understand what had just happened.
Please, I didn't agree to this.
The film cut to black and revealed the line, "Isn't it time someone called cut?" The message was simple. Does not end until someone outside the moment steps in. Broadcasters argue that the film was too intense for general viewing and should be restricted when it could air. However, Women's Aid kept their stance firm because the film was meant to show the reality, not hide it. The public response was strong, and many viewers said the film finally showed domestic violence in a way that felt honest and close to the truth victims experience every day. Level 5. Garage Air. Inside the garage, a man in the driver's seat holds a hose running from the exhaust area into the cabin. He's attempting to end his life through carbon monoxide poisoning. He leans back like someone waiting for the worst to happen. The crew filming this commercial had no idea this one shot would turn into a controversy that would haunt Hyundai for years. The garage door suddenly flew open, and his family stepped into the frame with fear on their faces because they thought they had arrived too late. But the man was sitting there completely unharmed. The entire setup was used to demonstrate the car's strength. The ad explained that he had been inside a Hyundai iX35, a hydrogen-powered car that emits only clean water vapor and nothing harmful. Hyundai released this commercial to promote the iX35 hydrogen model, but the response online was much more brutal than Hyundai expected. Mental health groups condemned the ad immediately, saying the scene used a moment tied to real pain as entertainment. Many found the commercial disturbing because it placed a family in a situation built on fear and emotional shock. Hyundai moved quickly, removing the video from every platform while the criticism continued to spread. People who had lost loved ones to carbon monoxide incidents spoke out, and the backlash eventually pushed Hyundai to issue a formal apology. To date, this commercial is remembered as one of the most troubling advertising mistakes of its decade. Blast in a box. A man walks out of a small apartment building, gets inside a car, and drives through a narrow road. The scene looks peaceful, yet he's about to make a decision that would upset thousands watching. The commercial was not made by Volkswagen. It came from an outside creative team that wanted to show how tough the Polo was, and they used a storyline to build their joke. The team expected the twist to shock viewers into laughing, but they ignored the real fear that people were living with after recent attacks across Europe. The Polo slowed as it passed a cafe filled with people eating and talking. The man stopped nearby, reached into his jacket, and held a detonator. In an instant, he pressed the trigger. The explosion hit, but the blast stayed inside the Polo. The outside of the car barely moved. The people at the cafe kept eating without turning their heads, but the man inside the car did not survive. The screen cut to black with the words, "Polo, small but tough." The team behind the ad thought the twist would land as a joke. Instead, the backlash started within hours. Families who had lived through similar fear felt the clip was careless and cold. Volkswagen responded immediately. They expressed that the ad was unauthorized, unapproved, and completely against their brand. They clarified that they had no part in the production and had rejected the concept from the start.
We are looking into a shocking ad that's going around online. The end slogan says, "Polo, small but tough." Well, this commercial is fiction. Volkswagen had nothing to do with it. It was actually created years ago by a team named Lee and Dan, who make these quirky and offbeat fake ads.
Even with that statement, the video spread across the internet because of its shock value, and the outrage grew until the agency responsible issued a public apology. Bridge Dreamfall. The line was moving at full speed when the small yellow General Motors robot dropped a single screw. The robot froze in place as the workers turned toward it. Everyone on that floor understood the gravity of a single tiny mistake. General Motors wanted to prove its obsession with perfection, and the ad crew thought this commercial about failure would help sell that message. The robot was removed from the factory and pushed into the outside world, and the scenes that followed showed how fast its life fell apart. It stood on a street corner, shaking under the cold wind while holding a condos for sale sign. Later, it worked at a fast food drive-thru holding a plastic speaker, but it was clear that none of these places wanted it either. Every new frame made the robot look more alone than the last. Then the ad reached its darkest point, moving towards something no one expected to see in a commercial. The robot stood on a bridge at night with a long stretch of headlights behind it. Then it stepped forward and fell, and the drop lasted long enough for viewers to understand exactly what the scene was showing. But just before it hit the water, the robot woke up inside the factory, fastening screws again as if nothing had happened. The entire fall had been its nightmare, a nightmare built from a fear of failing again. But the tone of the ad already crossed a line for many people watching. Mental health groups condemned the use of a attempt inside a Super Bowl commercial. Viewers said the sadness in the robot scenes felt too real and reminded them of losses they had lived through. General Motors were forced to pull and edit the controversial commercial following the intense backlash they received. The robot ad became one of the most argued about Super Bowl spots for its decade. Frozen in time. A young boy looks into the camera and says something that instantly stops the room cold.
I couldn't grow up because I died from an accident.
Nationwide had been running a safety push called Make Safe Happen, a campaign built to warn parents about preventable home accidents. To convey a message strong enough to break through the noise of everyday life, they placed the ad in the biggest broadcast of the year, believing the sharp emotional hit would make people listen. The commercial showed warm shots of a child's world, but the tone took a chilling note when the boy explained that none of it would happen for him. The cut from hope to loss came with no buildup, and the speed of that shift pushed millions of viewers into instant shock. Nationwide later explained that preventable accidents were the leading cause of childhood deaths in the United States.
At Nationwide, we believe in protecting what matters most. Your kids. Together, we can make safe happen.
But the ad was placed between jokes, celebrity cameos, and halftime hype, and the audience was not ready for such a heavy message. Within minutes, people wrote that the commercial ruined the night's mood and hit too hard for a game watched by families with children sitting inches from the screen. Although the campaign addressed a real risk, the shock of the delivery overshadowed everything the company hoped to achieve. Nationwide never ran an ad like this again, but that commercial became part of Super Bowl history because it did something no one expected on a night billed for noise and laughs. Level 6. 5,000 feet too low. The crew stayed focused as Rob Harris dropped from the plane in a steady dive with his board locked to his feet. But no one watching knew that this jump would become one of the darkest moments ever linked to a soft drink commercial. Mountain Dew was deep in its push for wild stunts, fast shots, and athletes who lived close to the edge. Rob Harris had become the face they trusted when they needed someone who could make danger look clean. He was one of the top sky surfers in the world, and for the 1995 GoldenEye tie-in, he was filmed as a Bond-style figure, performing sharp moves and controlled spins. Harris's sequence required a jump, a stable shoot pull, a clean cutaway, and a switch into a fast controlled descent before landing on a snowboard, and each step depended on perfect motion and perfect timing. The director wanted a stronger angle even after the commercial was already complete, and he asked Harris for one more take. So, on December 14th, 1995, Harris jumped again, and somewhere inside the quick chain of movements, he reached for his handles and pulled the wrong one. The Sky Surfer's main chute opened too early, the lines twisted, and the reserve never deployed. Joe Jennings, the aerial cameraman who had jumped beside him many times before, watched from above and understood in seconds that the fall could not be stopped. Investigators later explained that the jump had been set at around 5,000 feet, a height far lower than what sky surfers use for a cutaway maneuver. At that level, there was almost no space to correct a mistake, and once the lines tangled, the margin for recovery was gone. The commercial was already finished, but the production lost the athlete who had given the ad its strongest moment. Rumors spread later claiming Mountain Dew used the fall in the final cut, but a Snopes investigation confirmed that none of the accident footage appeared in any version of the ad. Harris's parents allowed the commercial to air because they wanted people to see the work he completed, not the moment that ended his life. After his death, friends and fellow athletes formed the Rob Harris Foundation to support young sky surfers and push for stronger safety measures. Under the bottle. Whole neighborhoods erupted the moment the number 349 appeared on television. People ran outside holding their bottle caps, proof that their entire lives had just changed.
898, I won!
None of them knew that this single broadcast would push the country into riots, lawsuits, and one of the darkest advertising disasters ever recorded. Pepsi had built the Number Fever campaign to crush its soda rivals in the Philippines, and they made it pretty easy to join the game. All you had to do was twist open a Pepsi, 7-Up, or Mirinda bottle, check the number under the cap, and hope it matched the next winning announcement. The idea spread fast, and soon homes, schools, and workplaces across the country were packed with boxes of saved caps people refused to throw away. When the winning number 349 flashed across screens, celebrations spread through the country in minutes. But Pepsi knew almost instantly that something was wrong. The company had printed around 800,000 caps with that number instead of the single jackpot they promised. Families who had spent years fighting to stay afloat gathered hundreds of 349 caps and insisted that this was the moment their lives were supposed to change. But when Pepsi announced that the 349 caps were misprinted and would not be honored, the excitement flipped into anger that spread across the country. Coalition 349 formed almost overnight. Thousands of Filipinos joined, claiming Pepsi had created the winning number and must now pay what they promised. Protests erupted outside bottling plants. Delivery trucks were blocked, attacked, and set on fire. Workers were pulled from routes because their safety could no longer be guaranteed. And reports documented the chaos growing from Manila outward as people who felt cheated took to the streets. Pepsi tried to calm the crisis with small consolation payouts, but the gesture felt insultingly small to people who believed they had won life-changing money. The legal battles dragged on for years, and the number 349 took on a life of its own. Number fever had been built to boost sales. Instead, it became one of the most infamous marketing failures in history. Level 7. Clean air lie. The boys hit the store running fast enough to knock over displays as they dump slushy mix across the counter. Outside, their mother moves from pump to pump calling their names.
Boys?
Suddenly, another woman riding a Volkswagen Passat TDI rolls past the station with her son sitting inside calm and polite. Volkswagen created this ad to push one idea. A mother who stops for fuel deals with chaos, and a mother who drives a clean diesel avoids it. They framed the Passat TDI as the smart choice, and they used quick editing and easy jokes to make diesel power look better than anything on the road. But Volkswagen already knew that the promise was false and much darker than most people believed. They were selling clean air while hiding something inside their engines that would turn the entire campaign into one of the biggest scandals in automotive history. Volkswagen filled billboards, magazines, showrooms, and TV slots with claims that their engines produced low emissions and protected the air that children breathe. But the engines carried a small line of hidden code. When the car sensed it was being tested, the software switched the engine into a clean mode and passed every emissions exam with perfect scores. Once the car returned to the road, the system was shut off and the real emissions came out. The levels were not slightly higher, they were up to 40 times the legal limit. Parents bought those cars believing they were helping the environment, but the engines were releasing far more pollution than Volkswagen ever admitted. The Mom commercial aired only months before investigators exposed the truth. When the story broke, the shock moved fast across every country where Volkswagen sold diesel cars. Governments demanded answers. The company faced billions in fines and one of the largest recalls in history. They pulled every clean diesel ad, every slogan, every smiling family shot, including the Passat commercial that once looked harmless.
Isn't diesel dirty?
Oh, say it's beautiful, for Christ's sake.
I think it's beautiful, but aren't diesels dirty?
Yeah, that's true.
I'll prove it to you.
You're gonna ruin your scarf.
See how clean it is?
In the end, the real danger was never the gas station chaos. The real danger came from the engines releasing pollution that no one agreed to breathe. Trust in a pack. A medical doctor sits down, leans back, and lifts a cigarette as if it were part of his normal break.
If you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette.
Camel built this ad during a time when cigarette brands used authority to shape public belief. They wanted to make smoking look safe, calm, and respectable, and they chose doctors because people already trusted them. The brand pushed the idea that if experts smoked Camels, ordinary people had no reason to doubt the product. In the commercial, the man is shown smoking a Camel while simultaneously attending to his duties as a doctor. The narrator speaks over him with a steady voice, citing a repeated national study of doctors from every field as if the number itself proves the product is safe. The camera then shifts to a calm instruction telling viewers to try a 30-day test and promising smoother throats and greater comfort if they switch to Camel for a month.
What cigarette do you smoke, doctor? According to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days? See how Camels agree with your throat.
The final shot cuts away from the doctor and shows a woman dressed for a night out, holding a Camel while the narrator praises the product's mild taste. What the ad never admits is that researchers had already started raising alarms about cigarettes in the early 1950s. Early reports linking smoking to lung cancer were appearing in medical journals across the United States, yet none of that information reached the public because tobacco ads faced almost no rules.
We've got to talk about the damage caused by the actual smoking. And it's those chemicals that you breathe in that do the damage. Many of them are toxic in different ways, and about 70 of them are known to cause cancer. And many of those substances have both short-term effects and long-term effects on the body.
The ad tries to end on a light tone, but the viewers could now see that the entire message was built on borrowed trust, taken from the one group that people trusted with their lives. Camel outright exploited that trust as a shield. The public response grew darker once people learned that the repeated national study had been manipulated. It was conducted by the tobacco company's own advertising agency, not an independent scientific authority. Critics called it one of the most harmful messages ever aired because it made smoking feel safe to viewers watching. The commercial was thankfully banned and voluntarily retired in 1997. God, did we still have smoking commercials in '97? I was a teenager by then. Holy crap! These disturbing commercials were planned and intentional. But what happens when the victims have no idea what's coming? Find out in the most disturbing TV challenges, Iceberg.